It was still dark outside when Daniel Mercer's alarm went off. The soft hum of the city below his penthouse couldn't drown out the weight that sat heavy on his chest. He opened his eyes slowly, staring at the ceiling for a moment before rolling out of bed. His mornings had become mechanical. Coffee, silence, and an inbox filled with bad news. Daniel wasn't just any man with an office job. He was the founder and CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in Silicon Valley, a company once praised for its brilliant innovation and powerful artificial intelligence systems. But over the past few months, everything that once made him proud had turned into a nightmare. The company's latest AI project, a data prediction model for a major government client, had crashed during a live demonstration 3 weeks ago. That single failure cost the company credibility, millions of dollars, and possibly its most important contract, worth nearly $200 million. It wasn't just a deal. It was the deal that would decide the company's future. Daniel walked into his kitchen and poured himself a black coffee. His reflection in the window looked older than he remembered. Tired eyes, gray starting to show near his temples, and the kind of exhaustion that no sleep could fix. He had built his empire from nothing. 10 years ago, he worked in a garage with 2 interns and a dream. Now he had hundreds of employees, international offices, and investors watching his every move. And right now, every one of those investors was calling him a failure. His phone buzzed on the counter. It was a message from his chief engineer, saying the overnight data tests had failed again. He didn't even need to open the report. He already knew what it said. The model's algorithm couldn't handle the new data parameters. Every attempt to fix it only made it worse. He took a deep breath and looked at the clock. It was 6:30 a.m. He had a meeting with the engineering team in 2 hours, but he knew there would be nothing new to hear. The last 3 weeks had been the same loop. Late nights, technical jargon, new strategies, and then silence when the systems failed again. His people were smart. Some of the brightest minds he'd ever worked with, but it wasn't enough. Something was broken deep inside the system and no one could see where. Daniel leaned against the counter and closed his eyes. He tried to remember what it felt like to be excited about work. The spark that had once kept him awake for days, coding until sunrise, felt like it had been buried under the mountain of responsibilities. A quiet sound pulled him out of his thoughts, the soft rustle of footsteps behind him. "Good morning, sir," came a gentle voice. He turned to see Lena, his housekeeper, entering the kitchen with her usual calm smile. She had worked for him for nearly 2 years, arriving early each morning before he left for the office. She was quiet, efficient, and rarely spoke unless spoken to. "Morning," Daniel replied absently. She nodded and went about her routine, cleaning the counter, checking the laundry list, and preparing breakfast he never ate. She had seen him like this before, standing by the window with that same heavy look in his eyes. She never asked questions. It wasn't her place, and Daniel appreciated that. But today she noticed something different. He looked not just tired, but defeated. "You haven't been sleeping well," she said quietly after a few minutes. Daniel looked up, surprised. "You can tell?" Lena gave a small smile. "The coffee cups. There were 3 in the sink yesterday morning." He chuckled softly for the first time that day. "You're observant." She just shrugged lightly and kept wiping down the table. Daniel picked up his tablet from the counter and scrolled through his emails again. More complaints, more warnings. His CFO had sent a reminder that if they lost the government deal, layoffs would be unavoidable. The thought twisted something inside him. He wasn't just losing money. He was losing people's trust. As he read, Lena glanced over his shoulder, not to snoop, but because she noticed the same whiteboard reflection in the kitchen window that had caught her eye for weeks. It was covered with messy equations, graphs, and code fragments. She didn't understand all of it, not completely, but it stirred something in her. Her father had been a math teacher. Back home, before she moved to the States, numbers had been her world. She used to solve puzzles faster than her classmates, and she dreamed of studying applied mathematics one day. But life had different plans. When her mother fell ill, she left school to work. Later, she moved abroad to support her family. Those whiteboard scribbles reminded her of something familiar, a life she had quietly set aside. She caught herself staring and quickly turned away. Returning to her work, Daniel noticed. "You like math?" he asked, half curious, half distracted. Lena froze for a moment, then smiled politely. I used to a long time ago. He raised an eyebrow. Used to? She nodded. Before I started working. It's been many years. I probably wouldn't remember much now. He gave a short, almost wistful smile. Well, you might remember more than my engineers right now. She didn't know if he was joking or not, but she saw the frustration in his eyes. She didn't press further. After breakfast, Daniel grabbed his coat and headed to the office. The drive was short, but every red light felt longer than usual. His mind replayed the same question over and over. What if this is the end? When he arrived at the office, the atmosphere was tense. Dozens of screens glowed in the dimly lit engineering floor. Half-empty coffee cups, scattered papers, and tired faces told the story of sleepless nights. Morning, everyone, Daniel said as he walked in. His chief engineer, Alan, looked up from his desk. Morning, boss. We ran the new simulations last night, but... Daniel raised a hand. Let me guess, same result, Alan sighed. Worse. The system's now rejecting 12% of data entries before processing. It's not scaling properly. We've tried optimizing the framework, but the algorithm keeps collapsing. Daniel walked over to the main screen, staring at the sea of numbers. The model's failure rate graph looked like a heartbeat monitor gone wild. Okay, Daniel said, keeping his tone calm. Let's start again. Walk me through the data structure. For the next 2 hours, the team debated. Equations, probabilities, neural weights. The conversation bounced around the room like a storm of confusion. Daniel listened, took notes, and asked questions, but deep down he knew they were circling the same dead end. By noon, the room was quiet again. Everyone sat in defeat, the hum of machines the only sound left. Take a break, Daniel said finally. We'll pick this up after lunch. He stayed behind, staring at the whiteboard covered in formulas. They all looked familiar, yet something about them felt off, like a puzzle with one piece that didn't belong. He rubbed his forehead. Maybe he'd been staring too long. Meanwhile, back at home, Lena was finishing up the morning chores. She moved quietly through the rooms, humming to herself. But as she passed Daniel's home office, she paused. The door was open and the whiteboard caught her attention again. The same chaotic swirl of symbols and lines. She stood at the doorway for a long moment, her heart beating faster for reasons she couldn't explain. Something inside her whispered to look closer. She stepped inside slowly, almost hesitantly, as if the numbers might shout back at her. Her eyes moved across the equations, tracing each variable like an old friend. Some of it made sense, but one part made her frown. A small detail, a symbol in the formula, seemed out of place. It wasn't a big mistake, but it disrupted the entire logic of the equation. She stared at it for several seconds. Could it really be that simple? Her hands itched to grab the marker on the desk. But she didn't. She wasn't supposed to touch anything in there. She was the maid, not a mathematician. She smiled to herself at the absurd thought. What would Daniel think if he saw her trying to correct his work? Still, she couldn't stop thinking about that small error. She stepped back, closed the office door, and went back to cleaning. But her mind stayed there, inside that formula. That evening, Daniel returned home later than usual. He looked even more worn out than in the morning. He dropped his keys on the counter, loosened his tie, and poured himself another coffee even though it was already past 9. Long day, Lena said softly from the doorway. The longest, he replied with a half smile. We're still stuck. The system just keeps rejecting our fix. She nodded sympathetically. Maybe sometimes looking too hard makes it harder to see. Daniel paused, then smiled faintly. You sound like one of my advisors, she laughed quietly. Maybe you just need rest. The brain works better when it's not fighting itself. He looked at her for a moment. Her calm, grounded presence felt strangely comforting. He had a team of experts giving him data, yet somehow her simple words made more sense. After she left for the evening, Daniel went to his office at home again. He turned on the lights and stared at the same whiteboard. He picked up the marker, trying to rework a section of the formula. But no matter how he adjusted it, it didn't fit. He threw the marker on the desk in frustration and sat down, rubbing his temples. Unbeknownst to him, Lena was still downstairs, finishing up some last-minute cleaning before leaving. She heard the sound of the marker hit the desk. She hesitated, then quietly walked upstairs. Sir? She called softly. Daniel looked up. Oh, Lena, sorry, I didn't know you were still here. I was just about to leave, she said gently. Are you okay? He sighed. Just tired. I've been staring at the same problem for weeks. Every fix we try makes things worse. She looked at the whiteboard again, hesitating before speaking. May I ask something? Daniel blinked. Sure. She pointed at a part of the equation. This symbol here, isn't it supposed to represent a recursive variable? But it's written like a static function. Daniel frowned, taken aback. You understand that? She blushed slightly. A little. I studied math a long time ago. Just basics. He stood up, curious now. And what makes you think it's wrong? She walked closer, nervous but steady. If you define it as static, it stops adapting when new data comes in. That might be why your system is rejecting inputs. It's not learning, it's freezing. Daniel stared at the whiteboard, then at her. His mind raced. Could that really be the issue? He had assumed the variable needed to remain constant to stabilize the algorithm. But what if the instability came from forcing it to stay constant? He quickly pulled out his laptop and tested the adjustment she mentioned. The screen flickered as the new simulation ran. For a few tense seconds, neither of them spoke. Then the result appeared. The failure rate dropped by almost half. Daniel's eyes widened. That's impossible. Lena stepped back, unsure if she had done something wrong. I didn't mean to. No, Daniel said quickly, turning to her. That actually worked, she blinked. Really? He nodded slowly, still staring at the numbers. You just spotted something my entire engineering team missed for 3 weeks. She looked embarrassed. I was just guessing. I'm sure your team knows more than me. Daniel shook his head in disbelief. No, you saw something none of us did. He turned back to the screen, running another simulation. This time, the system processed nearly all the inputs correctly. Not perfect, but closer than they had ever been. He exhaled, a mix of relief and shock. Lena smiled shyly. Maybe you can fix the rest tomorrow, after some rest. Daniel laughed softly for the first time in weeks. Maybe I should listen to you more often. She picked up her cleaning supplies and headed toward the door. Good night, sir. Good night, Lena, he said, still staring at the monitor. As she left, Daniel leaned back in his chair, replaying the moment in his mind. How could someone who hadn't touched mathematics in years spot something that top engineers overlooked? He looked again at the whiteboard, at the neat correction she had pointed out, and felt something stir inside him, not just surprise, but curiosity. There was something remarkable about her. He didn't know it yet. But this was only the beginning, the moment that would change both of their lives in ways neither of them could imagine. And as the night stretched on and the city lights blinked through his window, Daniel realized that maybe, just maybe, the answer to his company's $200 million problem had been standing quietly in his kitchen all along. The next morning began with sunlight, creeping slowly through the tall glass windows of Daniel's penthouse. The golden rays painted the marble floor as if trying to remind him that the world hadn't stopped turning. For the first time in weeks, Daniel woke up without the heavy pressure in his chest. He walked to his desk, half expecting last night's discovery to have been a dream. But the whiteboard was still there, and so were the numbers. Calmer now, structured, almost peaceful. He looked at the correction Lena had pointed out. It was such a small change, but it had shifted everything. He smiled to himself. How did she even see that? He whispered under his breath. He spent the next hour testing the new version of the algorithm. Each simulation performed better than before. The improvement wasn't just a lucky break, it was a genuine fix to a key part of the problem. His phone buzzed with a message from Alan. Any updates on your end? Daniel typed back, maybe. Meet me in my office at 8. By the time the sun was fully up, he was already dressed and ready. There was energy in his steps again, something he hadn't felt in months. He left his coffee half finished, eager to see if the team could replicate the results on a larger scale. Lena arrived a few minutes later, carrying her cleaning bag as usual. She noticed the change immediately. Daniel wasn't pacing or staring blankly at the floor this time. He looked alive. Good morning, she said softly. He turned and smiled. Morning, Lena. She noticed the whiteboard again, the fresh marks, the erased sections. You kept working last night? Yeah, he said, almost laughing. I couldn't sleep. Your suggestion, it actually worked. You have no idea how important that was. She blushed a little, shaking her head. I'm happy it helped, sir. It didn't just help, he said. It saved us. I'll tell you more later. I have to go test this with the team. He grabbed his briefcase and headed out the door, still smiling. Lena watched him leave, still unsure what to make of what happened the night before. She hadn't meant to interfere. She just saw something that didn't look right. That was all. But deep down she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Confidence. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to use her mind for something more than cleaning and organizing. At the office, the engineering floor buzzed with early chatter as Daniel walked in. The team looked surprised to see him grinning. "All right," he said, clapping his hands once. "We're trying something new today." Alan looked up. "A new model?" "Not exactly new," Daniel replied. "A small change to how we define the recursive variable in the learning loop. It was freezing during data adaptation. We fixed that, we might fix the crash." Alan frowned. "We already tried that last week." "Not like this," Daniel interrupted, already typing commands on the screen. "Look," he ran the code. The new simulation began processing data at lightning speed. The team leaned closer. One by one, the previous error messages vanished. The processing line smoothed out, clean and stable. Alan blinked. How did you—" Daniel didn't answer immediately. He just smiled and pointed at the graph. The failure rate dropped again, this time below 10%. "This correction," Alan said slowly, "solves almost everything." "It does," Daniel said. "And we didn't see it." The entire room erupted in relief. Some laughed, others clapped. A few just leaned back in disbelief. But as the joy filled the air, Daniel's mind drifted back to the quiet kitchen, the calm voice that had pointed out what all his experts had missed. He decided to keep that detail to himself. For now. By noon, the team had confirmed the model's stability under heavy testing. They weren't done yet, but it was a breakthrough big enough to change everything. Daniel called for a short meeting. "I know it's been a rough few weeks," he told them, "but this is the progress we've needed. Keep pushing. We might just save this contract." The team cheered. For the first time, hope returned to the building. After the meeting, Daniel returned to his office. He looked out the window at the city stretching far below. For years he had believed that solutions came from people with the right degrees, the right experience, the right titles. But what happened last night had quietly shaken that belief. When he got home that evening, the apartment was spotless as always. The faint scent of lavender hung in the air. Lena was polishing the glass table when he entered. "How was your day?" she asked politely. "Better than I could have imagined," he said. "You really helped us." She looked up in surprise. "Me?" he nodded. "We tested your correction. It worked perfectly. You fixed something my entire department missed." She laughed nervously. "That can't be right. I only mentioned what I thought looked off." "Sometimes that's all it takes," he said gently. "You have a good eye." She lowered her head, unsure how to respond. Compliments made her uncomfortable, especially from someone like him. "Did you ever think of going back to school?" he asked suddenly. She hesitated. "I did years ago, but life got in the way. Family needed me more. Then work, then time just passed." Daniel nodded. "I understand," she smiled faintly. "Thank you, but I think my time for studying is over. I'm happy just doing my job well." He didn't press further, but something in her tone stayed with him. There was quiet intelligence in her voice, a kind of curiosity that life had buried under responsibility. The next few days at the office moved quickly. The model was improving faster than anyone expected. Daniel's company began to stabilize. Investors who were once panicking now called to congratulate him. Yet every time someone praised the CEO's innovation, Daniel felt a flicker of guilt. The truth was, the breakthrough hadn't come from him or his engineers. It came from a woman who spent her mornings cleaning his kitchen. One evening, after another successful test run, Alan joined Daniel in his office. "Whatever inspired that change," Alan said, "it saved us. I hope whoever suggested it gets a big bonus." Daniel smiled faintly. "I'll make sure of that." When Alan left, Daniel sat back in his chair thinking about what to do. He couldn't just ignore what had happened. He also knew that telling the full story would raise eyebrows. Who would believe that the company's $1 million problem was fixed by a maid? But maybe they didn't need to believe it. Maybe it was enough that he knew. That night, when he returned home, Lena was already cleaning up after dinner. He watched her for a moment, the way she moved quietly, focused on every detail. She didn't act like someone waiting for praise. She simply worked, content in her routine. "Lena," he said after a moment. "I've been thinking." She looked up, cautious but curious. "About what, sir?" "About your suggestion the other night. You said you studied math before, right?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, I loved it. But I never finished my degree. What stopped you?" She hesitated, then said softly, "My mother got sick. I was 20. We didn't have enough for her medicine. I started working right after that. Later, I came here to help my family." Daniel listened quietly. There was no self-pity in her voice, just honesty. "Do you ever wish you could go back?" he asked. She smiled sadly. "Every day. But dreams are expensive." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He wanted to say something encouraging, something meaningful. But for once, words didn't come easily. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the office early. The system had passed the final stability test overnight. The government client confirmed they were resuming the contract. The company was officially safe. When the announcement went out, the office exploded with celebration. Laughter filled the halls. People hugged, shouted, and clapped each other on the back. Daniel stood in the middle of it all, smiling, but his thoughts were elsewhere. That evening, he stopped at a small bookstore on his way home. He picked up a thick textbook on applied mathematics and another on data science. He also bought a small notebook and a pen. When he got home, Lena was about to leave for the day. "Before you go," he said, handing her the bag, "this is for you." She looked confused. "For me?" he nodded. "It's nothing big. Just something to help you remember what you loved." She opened the bag slowly, her eyes widening as she saw the books. She ran her fingers over the cover. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he said gently. "Just promise me you'll read them." Her voice was quiet. "Thank you, sir. I'll try." As she left that night, she carried the books close to her chest like something precious. Over the next few weeks, their routines changed slightly. Lena still did her work around the house, but Daniel noticed her sometimes taking short breaks, sitting by the kitchen window with one of the textbooks open, scribbling notes into the small notebook he'd given her. She looked different when she studied, focused, alive, almost glowing with the same curiosity that had once led her to notice that missing piece on the whiteboard. Daniel never disturbed her during those moments. He just watched quietly, feeling strangely proud. One Friday evening, as he came home earlier than usual, he found her sitting at the dining table, completely absorbed in her book. She didn't even notice him at first. "You look busy," he said with a smile. She jumped slightly, embarrassed. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I was just reviewing something. I'll finish up right away." "Relax," he said, sitting down across from her. "Show me what you're studying." She hesitated, then turned the notebook toward him. It was filled with equations, diagrams, and notes written neatly in her handwriting. "I was trying to remember how to calculate conditional probabilities," she said. "It's been years, but it's coming back slowly." Daniel flipped through the pages, genuinely impressed. "You've done all this in a few weeks?" She smiled shyly. "It helps to have something to look forward to." He nodded. "You're really talented, Lena. You shouldn't stop again." She looked down, unsure what to say. After a moment, Daniel said, "You know, we're expanding the research division next quarter. They'll need data analysts and mathematicians, people who can look at problems from new angles." Her eyes widened. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying you should think about applying," he said with a small smile. "We can arrange part-time classes if you want to finish your degree. You've already proven you have the mind for it." She sat there in stunned silence. For a moment, her usual calm expression broke, replaced by disbelief and emotion. "Sir, I clean your house." "I don't belong in an office like that." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "You belong wherever your mind takes you." "You proved that already." She blinked back tears and nodded slowly. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he said softly. "And we'll figure out the rest later." That night after she left, Daniel stood by the window again, looking out over the city lights. The company was safe, the future bright, but what stayed with him most wasn't the success or the contract. It was the quiet reminder that brilliance could come from the most unexpected places. In a world obsessed with titles and resumes, he had been reminded of something simple yet powerful. Talent has no uniform. And while the rest of his team celebrated their victory, Daniel felt a different kind of joy. the kind that comes from seeing potential finally recognized. Somewhere in a small apartment across town, Lena sat on her bed with the same books open, the glow of the lamp lighting her determined face. She practiced formulas, solved problems, and smiled quietly every time the answers came back right. She wasn't just cleaning houses anymore. She was cleaning the dust off her old dreams, and she had no idea that soon, her quiet determination would change not just her life, but the way an entire company saw the world. The following weeks brought a new rhythm to Daniel's life. His company was stable again, the team had regained their confidence, and investors were happy. For the first time in months, he could breathe without feeling the constant weight of failure pressing on his chest. But even as things at work improved, his thoughts kept returning to the quiet woman who worked in his home every morning. He couldn't stop thinking about how her mind worked, how she had seen something that everyone else had missed. Each time he came home, he found Lena sitting by the window or at the dining table, studying her books between chores. Sometimes she would scribble notes furiously, lost in her own world. Other times she would pause, stare at the ceiling, and whisper equations to herself like someone reciting poetry. Daniel found it oddly inspiring. He saw in her the same hunger to learn that had once driven him when he started his company. One Friday evening, he returned home earlier than usual. He had just finished a long meeting about new projects, and all he wanted was quiet. When he entered the apartment, he saw Lena standing near his desk, carefully wiping down the whiteboard. She froze when she heard him come in. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to touch anything. I was just cleaning the board," he smiled. "It's fine. You're allowed to touch it. You've improved it before, remember?" She blushed slightly and smiled back. "That was luck." "I don't believe in luck," Daniel said. "Not after what you did." She finished wiping the board, then stepped back, looking at it as if it were a painting. "Do you ever stop working?" she asked softly. "Not really," he said with a laugh. "Even when I try, my mind doesn't let me." She nodded knowingly. "It's hard to switch off when your head is full of ideas." He looked at her for a moment. "You know, I used to think success came only from people who studied in big universities or had fancy degrees. But lately I'm starting to believe talent hides in all kinds of places." Lena gave a small smile. "Sometimes life just doesn't give everyone the same path. But that doesn't mean they don't have the same dreams." Those words stayed with him long after she left that night. The next morning, Daniel received an invitation to speak at a major technology conference. It was a big opportunity, one that could rebuild the company's image after their recent struggles. He accepted it but felt a strange pull to tell a different kind of story this time, something real, something human. He didn't want to just talk about machines or algorithms. He wanted to talk about how ideas could come from anywhere. Over the following days, Daniel began working on his presentation. He spent hours thinking about how to share the lesson he had learned, without revealing too much about Lena's private life. Meanwhile, Lena continued studying quietly. Every day she learned something new. When she didn't understand a concept, she stayed up late watching free online lectures. Her old passion for numbers had come alive again. One afternoon, as Daniel worked in his office, he heard soft knocking at the door. "Come in," he said. Lena stepped in, holding her notebook. "I'm sorry to bother you, sir, but could I ask you something?" "Of course." She opened her notebook and pointed at a formula she'd been working on. "I'm trying to understand this part. It's about predictive modeling. The book explains it, but I don't get how the model adjusts when there's missing data." Daniel looked at the page, surprised. "That's actually one of the most complex topics in data science." "You're already studying this?" She smiled nervously. "I got curious. I've been reading about it for days." He took a pen and sat beside her. "Okay, let's go through it." For the next hour, they sat side by side, working through equations together. It was strange for both of them. He was used to teaching engineers, not maids, but the conversation flowed naturally. Lena listened carefully, asked sharp questions, and took notes quickly. By the end of the session, Daniel leaned back and smiled. "You learn fast." Lena closed her notebook and laughed softly. "It helps when the teacher knows what he's doing." He grinned. "You'll be teaching me soon at this rate." Over the next few weeks, these small study sessions became a quiet routine. They never planned them, but somehow they always happened. Some mornings, he'd leave small notes on the whiteboard for her, tiny math puzzles or logic questions. She'd find them, solve them, and leave her answers underneath. It became their unspoken game. Each day, Daniel looked forward to seeing what she'd write next. One day, when she arrived at work, she found a printed sheet on the table. It was a form. "What's this?" she asked when Daniel walked in. He smiled. "An enrollment form. I made some calls to a local university. They have an evening program in data science. It's part-time, and they offer scholarships for people returning to education. I think you should apply." Lena froze. Her first instinct was to say no. "I can't. I wouldn't even know how to start again." "It's been so long. I'll help you," Daniel said gently. "You don't have to do it alone." Her hands trembled slightly as she looked at the form. It had been over a decade since she had filled out anything like that. Her mind flooded with memories, sitting in classrooms, solving equations, dreaming about a future that had felt out of reach. "You really think I could do it?" she whispered. "I don't think," Daniel said. "I know." That night, Lena took the form home. She sat at her small kitchen table, staring at it for hours. Her heart wanted to say yes, but her fears whispered all the reasons why she shouldn't. What if she failed? What if she was too old? What if she didn't belong? She thought about her mother, who used to tell her, "If you get the chance to learn, don't waste it." Knowledge is something no one can take away. By midnight, she picked up a pen and began filling out the form. The following week, Daniel received a message from the university. Lena had been accepted. When he told her the news, she couldn't believe it. She covered her mouth in shock, tears filling her eyes. "I got in?" He nodded, smiling warmly. "You did. Congratulations, Lena." For the first time since he'd known her, she cried, not from sadness, but from pure disbelief and joy. "Thank you," she said softly. "You have no idea what this means to me," Daniel smiled. "I think I do." From that day on, Lena's life changed. She still came to work in the mornings, but her evenings were now spent at the university. Her schedule was exhausting, but she didn't complain. She studied late into the night, balancing her job and her classes with quiet determination. Every weekend, Daniel asked her how school was going. She would tell him stories about her classmates, her professors, and the topics she was learning. Sometimes she brought her homework to the house and worked on it after cleaning. One Sunday afternoon, Daniel invited a few of his senior engineers over for a team meeting. They gathered in his home office to discuss new research directions. Lena was in the next room, quietly cleaning the living area. The engineers were debating a new problem related to system optimization. It was complicated, and they couldn't agree on the best approach. As they talked, Lena paused her work, listening quietly. She recognized some of the terms. They were similar to what she had been studying in class. She hesitated, unsure if she should speak. After a few minutes, she took a deep breath, stepped closer to the doorway, and said softly, "Excuse me, sir. May I say something?" Everyone turned, surprised. Daniel smiled. "Go ahead, Lena." She pointed at the diagram on the board. "I think the issue might be the feedback loop here. If the system's learning rate is too high, it could be skipping over the optimal value instead of approaching it slowly. Maybe lowering it would help the model stabilize." The room went silent. The engineers looked at each other, then at Daniel. One of them quickly adjusted the code to test her idea. A few seconds later, the results appeared on the screen. The system's performance improved significantly. No one spoke for a moment. Then one of the engineers laughed in disbelief. "She's right." Daniel couldn't help smiling. "I told you all, she has an eye for this." Lena blushed, suddenly self-conscious. "I didn't mean to interrupt. I just thought maybe it could help." "It did," Daniel said firmly. "A lot." The engineers began asking her questions, curious about her background. She answered modestly, saying she was studying again after many years. By the end of the meeting, everyone was impressed. When they left, Daniel turned to her. "You just solved another problem my best engineers couldn't." She laughed nervously. "I just got lucky again." "No," he said. "That's not luck. That's talent." Over the next month, things began to shift. Daniel started inviting her to sit in during some of his smaller meetings, not as a maid, but as an observer. At first, she resisted, saying she didn't belong in that world. But he insisted. "Just listen," he told her. "You don't have to say anything. I just want you to see how these things work." Slowly, she began to gain confidence. She would take notes quietly, sometimes asking thoughtful questions afterward. Her insights became sharper, her understanding deeper. Daniel noticed how the team respected her too. They had seen her ideas work, and that spoke louder than any title or degree could. By the end of the semester, Lena had become more than just an employee. She had become part of the creative energy that kept the company growing. One evening, after a long day, Daniel found her sitting by the window again, staring at the city lights. "You look thoughtful," he said, sitting across from her. She smiled faintly. "I was just thinking how strange life is. A few months ago I was scared to even touch your whiteboard, and now I'm solving problems with your engineers." He nodded. "Life has a way of surprising us when we're brave enough to try." She looked at him and said quietly, "I used to think people like you and me lived in different worlds, but now I see we just took different roads to the same destination." Daniel smiled. "Maybe, but some roads take more courage than others." "Yours did." The room was quiet for a moment, just the hum of the city outside. Lena looked at her book stacked neatly on the table and whispered, "For the first time I feel like I'm finally where I'm supposed to be." Daniel nodded. "And this is only the beginning." Neither of them knew it yet, but that beginning would soon lead to something far greater. Something that would not only change Lena's life, but would also make the entire company question how it measured talent, success, and worth. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary stories don't start in boardrooms or universities. They start in the quiet corners of ordinary lives with someone who dares to believe they can do more. And Lena had finally dared. Weeks turned into months, and the quiet rhythm of progress continued. Lena balanced her life between work, study, and discovery. Her once simple days were now full of meaning. Each morning she arrived early, cleaning the house while humming softly, and each evening she went straight to the university, her notebook always tucked under her arm. Daniel noticed how her confidence was growing. She walked differently now, head high, eyes focused, carrying an air of purpose. It made him smile every time he saw her scribbling equations on the small notepad she always carried. Sometimes, he wondered what she was writing. One afternoon, Daniel had to prepare for an important presentation to the board. The company was working on a new artificial intelligence model, something that could change the industry if it worked. But progress had slowed, and the engineers were struggling to make the model run efficiently. As usual, Lena was in the background, tidying the space before leaving for class. Daniel didn't realize she was still in the room when he muttered to himself, "There has to be a simpler way to train this thing without draining so much power." She hesitated by the door. "Maybe there is," she said softly. Daniel turned, surprised. "You're still here?" She smiled shyly. "I was just finishing up, but I overheard what you said." He motioned for her to come closer. "What are you thinking?" She hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward. "In class, we learned about pruning algorithms, removing unnecessary layers to make systems faster. Maybe you could simplify your model like that. Cut the parts that don't add much value." Daniel blinked, thinking it over. "That actually makes sense. It's like cleaning," Lena added, smiling. "Sometimes you have to remove the clutter before you can see what really matters." Daniel laughed softly. "You make it sound so simple." "Maybe it is," she said. "You just have to trust the process." That night, Daniel called his lead engineers and asked them to test the idea. They stayed late, adjusting the system according to Lena's suggestion. When the results came in, the new version ran 40% faster with the same accuracy. It was a breakthrough. Daniel couldn't believe it. Once again, the Maid had solved something that experts had been struggling with for weeks. The next morning, when Lena arrived, he was waiting for her. "You did it again," he said, smiling. She looked confused. "Did what?" "Your idea worked. The model is running better than ever." Her eyes widened. "Really? Really? You've officially helped this company more than some people on my payroll." She laughed nervously. "Oh no, please don't say that. I mean it," he said. "You have a gift, Lena." She lowered her gaze, trying to hide her smile. "I just like figuring things out." Daniel nodded. "That's what great minds do." Over the next few weeks, word of Lena's ideas began spreading quietly among the team. At first, they didn't know how to feel about it. A housemaid solving problems that data scientists couldn't. But when they saw the results, respect replaced doubt. Some of them even started asking her questions during her visits. She never acted proud or showed off. She always said, "I'm still learning." One Friday, Daniel decided to take a bold step. The company had been invited to present its new technology at an innovation expo. Thousands of people would attend, including investors, competitors, and journalists. He called Lena into his office. "I have something to ask you," he said. She sat down carefully, not knowing what to expect. "I want you to come with us to the expo," Daniel said. "You've been part of this project in ways no one else knows. You deserve to be there." Her eyes widened. "Me, but I'm not part of the company." "You are now," he said with a gentle smile. "At least you should be. You've earned that." Lena shook her head. "Sir, I can't. I wouldn't even know what to wear, what to say." "Then we'll figure it out together," Daniel interrupted. "You don't need to pretend to be anyone else. Just be you." She looked at him with disbelief. "You really think I belong there?" "I know you do," he said firmly. "This whole project wouldn't exist without you." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She stared at her ceiling, heart racing, thinking about what Daniel had said. The idea of standing in a room full of professionals terrified her. But deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, "You've earned this." The next morning, she stood in front of her small mirror, holding up the simple dress she had bought years ago for special occasions. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and elegant. She smiled nervously, telling herself she could do this. When the day of the expo arrived, the venue was buzzing with people. Large screens displayed company logos. Reporters moved through the crowd and teams prepared their demonstrations. Daniel's company had one of the main booths. His engineers were setting up laptops and projectors when Lena arrived, her eyes wide with awe. She had never seen anything like it. Daniel greeted her warmly. "You look perfect," he said. She blushed. "Thank you. I'm still trying to understand why I'm here." "You'll see soon enough," he said with a smile. When it was time for the presentation, Daniel took the stage. The audience was large: investors, tech enthusiasts, students, and journalists, all waiting to hear about the company's new system. Daniel began by talking about the journey, the challenges, the breakthroughs, and the lessons learned. But halfway through, he paused, looking toward the side of the stage. "There's someone I want to introduce," he said into the microphone. "Someone who taught me that genius doesn't always come from where you expect it." Lena froze as Daniel gestured toward her. "Her name is Lena," he continued. "She started working for me as a housekeeper. But a few months ago, she solved one of the most complex problems this company had ever faced. Since then, she's helped us again and again. She reminded us that true talent doesn't need a title. It just needs a chance." The audience went silent. All eyes turned toward Lena. Daniel smiled at her gently. "Would you come up here, please?" Her legs felt weak, but she walked up the steps slowly, her hands trembling. When she reached the stage, Daniel whispered, "You'll be fine. Just speak from your heart." She took the microphone, her voice shaky at first. I don't know what to say. I'm not a scientist or an engineer. I just love learning. And I guess sometimes when you look at things with fresh eyes, you see something others miss." The room was silent for a moment, and then applause erupted, loud, genuine, and long. Lena stood there stunned, tears filling her eyes. She couldn't believe what was happening. After the presentation, people crowded around her asking questions. Some were curious about her ideas. Others were just inspired by her story. She spoke humbly, never taking full credit, always saying, "It was teamwork." By the end of the day, Daniel's booth had become one of the most visited at the expo. Reporters were asking for interviews, and investors were eager to meet the maid who outsmarted AI. On the way back home, Daniel and Lena sat quietly in the car. She looked out the window, still processing everything. "That was unbelievable," she said softly. Daniel smiled. "You were amazing." "I was terrified," she admitted, laughing. "Good," he said. "That means it mattered." She looked at him and said, "Thank you for believing in me." "You made it easy," he replied. In the following weeks, the story spread. News outlets picked it up. CEO credits housekeeper for breakthrough in AI efficiency. Social media buzzed with admiration. People called it the story of the year. But fame wasn't what Lena wanted. She continued her studies quietly, refusing interviews and focusing on learning more. Daniel respected that. He didn't push her into the spotlight again. Instead, he offered her something better, a position in the company's research division. "I want you to join officially," he told her one morning. "You don't have to stop your studies, but I'd like you to work with the team part-time." "You've already proven you belong here." She was speechless. "Work in the research division? But I'm still studying." You'll learn more by doing, he said. And besides, we need your perspective. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Okay, I'll try. Her first day in the research lab was surreal. Everyone treated her with respect. Some still looked surprised to see her there, but no one questioned her ability. She was quiet, observant, and always eager to understand how things worked. Whenever she found something interesting, she shared it with Daniel. Sometimes her suggestions seemed simple, but they often led to big improvements. One day, Daniel found her sitting alone in the lab, staring at the screen with furrowed brows. Everything okay? He asked. I think there's something off in the model, she said. It's accurate, but it's too predictable. It's not learning anymore, it's just repeating patterns. Daniel leaned in. So what do you suggest? Maybe we should teach it to make small mistakes, she said. That way it can learn from them, kind of like people do. Daniel smiled, impressed again. You realize that's a philosophy most experts spend years to understand? She laughed softly. Maybe I just think like a student. Or maybe you think like a genius, he said quietly. Weeks passed and Lena's role in the company grew. She became a symbol of hope, proof that potential could come from anywhere. The employees started mentoring people from non-traditional backgrounds. Daniel made it a new company policy to hold open workshops for anyone interested in learning about technology, regardless of their degree. Lena helped lead the first session. Dozens of young people showed up, students, workers, even a few retirees eager to learn. She spoke to them in her calm, sincere way, telling them how she started from nothing but curiosity. You don't have to be born with opportunities, she said. Sometimes you just have to notice them when they appear, and believe that you deserve to take them. By the end of the day, many people stayed behind just to thank her. One girl, no older than 17, said, You made me believe I can do it too. Lena smiled gently. You can, and one day you'll help someone else believe it too. Daniel watched from the back of the room, proud. He knew then that Lena's story was no longer just about her. It had become something bigger, a spark that would inspire countless others. That night, after everyone had left, he walked into the empty office. The whiteboard still had Lena's notes from the session. He looked at her handwriting, neat, thoughtful, full of life, and realized how far she had come. When she first stepped into his house, she was quiet, unsure, almost invisible. Now she was a light, bright, humble, and unstoppable. He smiled to himself and whispered, Sometimes the best discoveries aren't about technology. They're about people. Lena, meanwhile, sat at her small desk at home writing in her notebook. At the top of the page, she wrote a simple sentence. Never let where you start decide where you end. And under it, she began sketching an idea, something new, something that could help people like her learn faster, easier, and for free. She didn't know it yet. But that small idea would one day grow into something extraordinary, something that would change even more lives than she could imagine. Months had passed since the day of the first open workshop, and life had taken on a new meaning for both Daniel and Lena. What started as an unexpected discovery had grown into something that touched people far beyond the walls of the company. The story of the maid who solved a 200 million problem had become more than just a headline. It had become a symbol. People around the world wrote to Daniel's company, sharing their own dreams and struggles, thanking them for proving that opportunity could exist anywhere. But for Lena, fame wasn't the goal. She remained the same, humble, quiet, and focused. She still lived in her small apartment, still took the bus to work, and still spent late nights reading and learning. Her life was simple, but her world had expanded in ways she could never have imagined. Every morning, she still arrived early at Daniel's house. Though she no longer worked as a maid, she kept helping around as a gesture of gratitude. Daniel often teased her about it, saying, You don't have to clean my house anymore. She would smile and reply, Old habits die hard. One day, while walking through the office, Daniel noticed a group of interns gathered around a computer screen. They were talking excitedly about something. When he got closer, he realized they were watching a short documentary someone had made about Lena's story. He watched quietly as the narrator's voice said, Sometimes brilliance is found where the world least expects it. All it takes is one person to see it. When the video ended, Daniel looked at his team. He said, that story isn't just about her. It's about all of us. It's about remembering that the next big idea can come from anyone, If we listen. That same evening, Lena walked into his office holding her notebook. "I've been working on something," she said softly. Daniel smiled. "I'm not surprised. What is it this time?" She opened her notebook and showed him sketches of an app interface. "I was thinking, a platform where people like me, people who don't have access to formal education, can learn for free. It would have lessons but also challenges, real-world problems to solve. It could connect learners with professionals who can guide them." Daniel's eyes lit up. "That's incredible. You've basically designed a bridge between experience and opportunity." She shrugged modestly. "I just thought about how I learned. I didn't need fancy tools. I just needed someone to believe in me and access to knowledge." Daniel leaned back in his chair thinking. "We can make this happen, Lena. Not just as an idea, but as a real project." She blinked in surprise. "You mean, actually build it?" "Why not?" he said. "We have the technology, the people, and the story. It's time we used what we've built to help others." Lena hesitated. "But who would run it?" Daniel smiled. "You, of course." Her eyes widened. "Me? Who better?" he said. "It was your idea, your journey. You understand what it feels like to start from the bottom. That's exactly the kind of leadership this needs." For a moment she couldn't speak. She stared down at her notebook, feeling her throat tighten. "I don't know if I can do that." "You can," Daniel said gently, "and I'll be right here to help you." That night, Lena sat at her desk staring at her notes. The thought of leading a project terrified her. She was used to solving problems quietly, not standing in front of teams or making big decisions. But she also knew that fear was part of growth. She remembered something Daniel once told her. "Sometimes, the things that scare you most are the ones that change your life the most." So she decided to try. The next morning, she walked into the office with a quiet determination. Daniel introduced her to a small group of developers and designers who would help build the new platform. Together, they brainstormed ideas, tested features, and created prototypes. Lena named the project Open Path. The idea was simple but powerful, a free learning platform where anyone, anywhere, could learn practical skills by solving real-world problems. No degrees, no barriers, just curiosity and effort. In the first few months, progress was slow. There were technical issues, funding challenges, and moments of doubt. But Lena's calm determination kept everyone moving forward. She never raised her voice, never demanded perfection. She simply reminded everyone why they were doing it. "This isn't about building another app," she said during one meeting. "It's about giving people a chance to believe in themselves." As the months passed, Open Path began to take shape. The platform allowed users to pick challenges based on their interests: engineering, data science, design, even business strategy. Volunteers from around the world signed up as mentors, offering guidance and feedback. When they finally launched the beta version, Daniel insisted that Lena present it. Standing on stage once again, she looked out at the audience, students, professionals, and curious onlookers. She took a deep breath and said, "I started as someone who cleaned rooms, not as someone who wrote code. I never imagined standing here today, but if my story proves anything, it's that learning doesn't belong to one kind of person. It belongs to everyone." The room erupted in applause. Within weeks, the platform went viral. Thousands of people signed up. Some were high school students from small towns. Others were parents who had left education years ago, and some were retirees who just wanted to keep learning. Stories began pouring in. People who had built their first projects, solved real business problems, and even gotten jobs through the challenges they completed on Open Path. Each time Lena read one of those messages, she felt a quiet sense of joy. She didn't need awards or recognition. Seeing others grow was enough. One evening, after another long day at the office, Daniel found Lena sitting by the window again, just like old times. "Still thinking?" he asked, smiling. She turned to him and laughed softly. "Always." He sat across from her. "Do you realize how far you've come?" She looked out at the city lights. "Sometimes it doesn't feel real. I keep expecting to wake up and find it was all a dream." "It's not," Daniel said. "You changed more than just your own life. You changed mine too. You reminded me what success really means." She smiled quietly. "And what does it mean now?" He thought for a moment. "It means using what you have to help others become who they're meant to be." For a while, neither of them spoke. The city glowed outside, full of movement and life. Then Lena said softly, "Do you ever think about that day? The first time you caught me solving your problem?" Daniel laughed. "How could I forget? You scared the life out of me." She laughed too. "I was scared you'd fire me." "I almost did," he admitted, smiling. "But thank God I didn't." They both laughed and then sat quietly, letting the memory wash over them. It was hard to believe how one small moment, one act of courage had started everything. Months later, Open Path grew beyond anything they imagined. Universities and companies started partnering with them, offering certifications and real-world opportunities. Government programs adopted it to help unemployed workers reskill. Lena became the face of a global movement for accessible learning. Yet she never changed. She still wore simple clothes, spoke humbly, and treated everyone equally. People loved her not just for what she did, but for who she was. One day, she received a letter from a young boy in a remote village. It read, "I used your app on my neighbor's phone. I learned how to fix machines. Now I help my father in his shop and we earn more money. Thank you for giving me a chance." Lena read it twice, tears forming in her eyes. She placed the letter on her desk and whispered, "This is why it was all worth it." Daniel walked in just then and noticed her wiping her eyes. "Everything okay?" She smiled. "Yes, better than okay." He looked at the letter and nodded. "You've done something beautiful, Lena." She shook her head. "We did." Years later, the story of how it all began was still told in classrooms, documentaries, and conferences. But for Lena, it always came back to one thing: curiosity. The small spark that had driven her to pick up a whiteboard marker and solve a problem no one else could. She often told students, "Never underestimate a curious mind. It can take you places you never dreamed you could go." And she lived by those words every day. As time went on, Daniel slowly stepped back from the company, handing more responsibilities to younger leaders. Lena continued to lead Open Path, expanding it to reach millions around the world. On his last day before retirement, Daniel visited her office. She greeted him with the same warm smile she always had. "I guess it's your turn now," he said. She laughed. "Don't say it like you're disappearing." "I'm not," he said. "I'll still be around, just watching proudly." He handed her a small box. Inside was the same whiteboard marker she had used years ago, the one she had grabbed that first day when she changed everything. "I thought you might want this," he said. She held it gently, her eyes misting. "Thank you. I'll keep it as a reminder," he smiled. "Of what?" "That sometimes you don't need power or titles to make a difference," she said softly. "You just need to care enough to try." Daniel nodded. "Exactly." They stood for a long moment, both knowing that this was more than just the end of an era. It was the beginning of something lasting. After he left, Lena placed the marker on her desk. Then she opened her laptop and began typing a message to the Open Path community. "When I started learning again, I thought I was too late. I thought the world had already moved on without me. But I was wrong. It's never too late to start. The moment you decide to believe in yourself, that's when your story begins." She hit send and leaned back, watching the sunset through her office window. The city glowed in shades of gold and orange, the same way it had on that first evening years ago. And for a moment, she closed her eyes and smiled, because she finally understood that life wasn't about where you came from. It was about what you dared to do when no one expected you to. She had dared to try, and because of that, the world was a little brighter.